Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldsschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, the Comic Book Cast, and the Reopened Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida Facebook page. Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia and I'm here with a brand new guest who's joining along. He is a reviewer known for tackling works such as Kids Are Smarter Than This and Pop Riffs, and he does various theme months looking at some of his favorite directors. We have Kyle Norty. Welcome aboard, Kyle.
Hello everyone.
So yeah, today we're going to be discussing about the Harry Potter franchise. As of a couple of weeks ago, the first Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was published about 20 years ago. So I thought to myself, it would be a perfect time to look back on the franchise. So yeah, Kyle, were you first introduced to the books or the movies?
The movies. I saw the first 3 movies before I started reading the books, actually.
Ah, and I take it that you saw the first movie, right? Did you see it in theaters?
No, I barely knew anything about it. I knew it was a big thing. Like, I even remember my school did this, like, big Harry Potter themed day or something in 3rd grade when the first movie was coming out, but I didn't see it. And I remember the big line at the theater, but I didn't see it until it came out on DVD, actually. I think my cousins brought it over. Because on DVD at that point, either that or he rented it. I'm pretty sure it was my cousins, though.
Okay. Yeah, I actually read the book first. When I was in, I was in either the 7th or 8th grade back in 1998. And that was when my school said that we were going to be reading the Harry Potter books in English class. And every day we would read a chapter, and we would answer questions based off of the chapter of the book. And it was like one of the very few times in English class when I would be reading a book and I would be really excited about what would happen next. And so it would be a time in which I actually read in advance and I already knew about the book before the class even finished the book. And so ever since then, I used to go over to like the Warner Brothers store over in a mall in Brooklyn. It's called the King's Plaza Mall. And they actually had a store selling Harry Potter merchandise even before the movie came out. So I used to buy merchandise that had, like, the book's depictions of Harry Potter, like, really lanky Harry Potter with, the knobbly knees and the thick glasses, and Ron with the red hair and the freckles, and Hermione with her bushy hair. So, yeah, I used to remember seeing those a lot. And then when the movie came out, the merchandise looked very much like the characters from the movie. But, yeah, I remember I remember when I first saw the movie in theaters. And I must have been like 14 years old, and I remember being incredibly excited. I hadn't been excited about a movie ever at that point. And then afterwards, when I first saw the movie, I was just blown away with it. And then that was when the book started coming out, like, in conjunction with the movies. and then I pretty much caught up with everything, and then I heard some news about the Universal rides and all that stuff, and that got even me more excited. As of right now, I still haven't gone over to Universal Studios with the Harry Potter attraction, but I plan on going there hopefully really soon. So yeah, I guess we can start off our discussion of the franchise. So with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, in comparison to the book and the movie, there are some differences, but it's relatively the same. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
The first movie, first movie in particular, I think is one of the most close adaptations. If you read the Rotten Tomatoes consensus, it almost seems kind of negative in how it describes it. It's like so close, and what more? That there's very little room for surprises. What more could Potter fans want? It's really weird, but yeah.
But that was before that, adaptations stuck really close. Nowadays, there might be some that aren't even close to it at all.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's true. But yeah, I think the first movie is pretty much just as close as one of the closest adaptations I've seen. Granted, it's relatively short. The book is pretty short compared to later books, and the movie was still I think almost 2.5 hours long, so it makes sense. Later movies could not possibly condense all the whole book, so it makes I can't think if there's anything really hugely different.
The only thing that I've noticed differently when reading the book and watching the movie for the first time when I was 14 was, they actually did have to trim a lot of things from the beginning. Like, in the beginning of the book, it starts off with the Dursleys. It starts off with the Dursleys being a very normal family, and it starts off with the introduction that, Vernon Dursley does not like anything out of the ordinary. He likes living a normal life in his job, and he has a wife, and he has a baby son, and then he notices that there are a lot of strange people with different colored outfits, and they're talking about how, the boy who lived, he survived the attack of he who must not be named, and Mr. Dursley was like, what are they talking about? Who is this he who must not be named? And then they're saying the name, Harry Potter, and then he's like, wait, my wife has a sister named Lily, and I think they have a son named Harry, or maybe it's Henry, or something like that. So he kind of pushes it aside, and then we get into the way the movie starts, in which we have Hagrid, Professor McGonagall, and Dumbledore dropping Harry off at the Dursleys because his parents were killed by Voldemort. And then it starts off, very similar to the movie as well, in which it's Dudley's birthday and Harry's treated like shit. But here's the thing, we actually do get to see what Dudley's birthday looks like. Everybody knows about the presents and that how he gets 36 presents, and Dudley's not happy because last year he got 37. But then they go over to the zoo. And then we actually get to see more about the zoo, in which Dudley has his friends coming along with him, and Harry is just enjoying the zoo because he's never been outside ever. And then it cuts into the scene in which he speaks to the snake in Parseltongue, which will later be in the second book. And then it delves a little bit more deeper, and then the letters coming by from Hogwarts, and that goes into a deeper thing. But, the movie kind of skims through all that, but it does relatively give off the notion of what the beginning was. I think the only thing that I noticed definitely was that they did not include Peeves the Poltergeist in any of the movies as opposed to being featured in the book.
Yeah, he was supposed to be in the first one. I think they said they filmed it, and it was Rick Mayall, the British comedian.
Yeah, I think so.
But no footage has ever been shown, which I really want to see that footage. You'd think they, maybe after his passing, maybe they didn't want to do it or something like that, but I think it would be interesting to see that. Maybe it's because the effect wouldn't have looked as good in the first movie, but I'm not sure how they would have done it, on a green screen or have him on wires or something.
I'm kind of surprised that they never had Peeves replaced, because kind of sounds very similar to how Chris Farley was the original voice of Shrek, and they replaced him to Mike Myers after he passed away. So I don't know, it wasn't that much of a big loss, because Peeves in the books have always been perceived as him teasing Harry and all the other students, being a massive troublemaker. So I guess something like in the first couple of books, he was joking around, but maybe as later on throughout the series, when it gets a little bit more darker, maybe his inclusion wasn't very necessary. So, not much of a big loss to me.
Yeah. I remember him in, like, the first 2 PC games, and he was always one of the most annoying parts of those, just because he's so fast. Trying to defeat him was always hard. Really hard.
Yeah, I especially remember the one in which it's the second game, the Chamber of Secrets, in which you're trying to prevent the goblins from reaching over to Ginny because apparently, Ginny was writing a love note and, she was sending him a love potion, and Harry wanted to get away from that, and so while he was running, and then if you lose or if you trip and fall, then you have the goblins coming by and singing the song, and then Peeves would come by and say, oh, look, it's Potty Waddy Potter, and, Ginny has a big crush on you, or something like that. But yeah, not really much of a loss for me. And, looking back on the movies, I want to talk about that. As adaptations, they did have to skim a lot, but I think the one thing that I can say, besides the music and the effects, I think that the casting is absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Some people don't like, I know Sir Michael Gambon as Dumbledore in, 3 through 8, but I think he personally does a good job.
Sure.
And I can't think of anyone who's like, oh yeah, that does not fit. Like, everyone fits in somewhat.
Yeah.
And some are like, I could not imagine someone else playing that if they remake it or do a mini series or something.
Yeah, I was actually going to be talking about that because, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe many years down the road they'll probably have to maybe quote unquote remake it to fit more closely to the book because the books and the movies had to be done roughly around the same time. Definitely reminds me a little bit about how in anime, the likes of Dragon Ball Z and Full Metal Alchemist and Sailor Moon, they were all done roughly around the same time that the mangas were being produced and published. And so a lot of them had to take the liberties of, okay, we're going to change the story, we're going to change the character portrayals, just so that the manga and the anime can flow more consistently. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe sometime down the line they want to make a more faithful adaptation.
Yeah, I could see that. Sort of maybe what the Netflix did with the Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yes.
And I really like that Series of Unfortunate Events movie, but I think the series does a much better job of adapting the books.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when the Lord of the Rings movie started coming out, and then we had Harry Potter, then we had Chronicles of Narnia. Everybody was trying to be the next fantasy blockbuster. We had obviously Paramount and Nickelodeon doing the Series of Unfortunate Events, and then we had the Spiderwick Chronicles and the Bridge to Terabithia. So yeah, it's kind of like how today we have the superhero genre. Back 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we had the the fantasy genre.
Yeah, superheroes and young adult dystopian futures.
Yes, that too. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that for the most part, the first book as well as the first movie is pretty solid. You have all the characters introduced, and the one thing that I did really like was that, unlike something like Lord of the Rings, in which it took place in this huge fantasy world, it took place in modern times, or the 90s more specifically, and it opened up this gigantic fantasy world that hasn't been as expanded with the fantasy world since at least Narnia. And I just kind of find it very fascinating about how each of the locations and each of the terms and even the foods and the way that people dress and the way that and the way that Hogwarts was and all the other schools and all that stuff, it all just kind of build up into this big universe that really puts into the imagination of I want to see if I can go there. I want to experience that kind of stuff, which I remember reading an article many years ago about when Harry Potter was coming out, that it was the book series that made kids read again. And it brought kids into a rich, detailed, imaginary world that's something on the likes of the more popular books at the time, like The Babysitter's Club or Goosebumps, or even Animorphs tried to do, but never really succeeded.
Yeah. I was always sort of the reader as a kid, but Harry Potter was one of those books that I had to make sure to read every time it came out. I always made time to read it at least once a year.
Yeah, I felt the same way too, in which every time that a book announcement would be happening, or every time that there would be discussions of, oh, there's going to be a Harry Potter day over at this bookstore, or, there's going to be a huge midnight release of this book coming out. Everybody was flocking over, waiting until who knows how long, just so they can be able to get a copy before anybody else, which... don't get me wrong, I love the books just as much as the next person, but I would never be that desperate to do that. I probably wouldn't have been able to do it anyway, but that was actually pretty cool to see that as much of, as much controversy as the Harry Potter books were. I remember that just as much praise it was for the series, there was also a lot of people saying that it led, the reintroduction of witchcraft being a good thing, it led up to so many Christian parents forbidding their kids to even read it. And I remember there was even a book of it saying about how, how Harry Potter kind of reintroduces, aspects of the devil and stuff like that, which, oh my God, I'm glad that those days are over.
Yeah, I knew one family like that, but I rarely ever heard of that when it was really popular. It was more after the fact, after all the books had come out.
Oh, really? I remember when that stuff was during the books came out. I remember seeing news reports, and maybe because I come from a Christian family, maybe I heard that a lot more. But I remember there was I remember when there was news reports about how priests and various religious people discuss about how they forbid their children from watching Harry Potter movies or reading the books because they were afraid that it would lead them to, learning more about witchcraft, which is it's completely ridiculous, to be quite honest.
It is.
But it's not like if nowadays, if you're gonna show your kids the Hunger Games, they're not gonna go around killing people.
Yeah. Especially since that's supposed to be the bad thing. That's what the bad guys do. Exactly.
So, yeah. It's just, this is a time in which things just got way out of proportion. But, yeah, going back into the discussion of Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone for our UK and international listeners. I think that for the most part, it is a really solid book. Looking back on it 20 years later, it does seem a little bit more short compared to all the others, and it does seem to not be as dark as maybe they thought. That if you were a person who read the later books or saw the movies for the first time, it's a very light adventure. It focuses on Harry turning 11 years old and introducing the world of Hogwarts, introducing the characters, and just, it's kind of dipping your toe into the world of Hogwarts and Diagon Alley and all that stuff. So, yeah, and of course, I really did also another thing that was really stand out for me was when I went to see the movie for the first time. I had always imagined in my mind, man, how would they do Quidditch? Because, sure, I wasn't too concerned about the casting choices or, how would they act really well. After all, I was 14. The one thing that I was really concerned about, man, how's Quidditch gonna look like? I had seen it in the game, but never in the movie, and then when I did see it in the game, it was oh man, that was one of my most favorite moments in any experience I've had in a movie theater. I remember everybody was cheering and applauding when Harry was chasing after the golden snitch, and then when he caught it, they were cheering and applauding. I thought that was actually really cool. Yeah, I think I did have I had 2 games of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I had the PlayStation version, and I had the Game Boy Color version, which is actually kind of a Final Fantasy RPG-like thing, but you never got to play Quidditch in that one. And also another thing that really stuck out to me was, the introduction of, how Professor Quirrell came from, a very meek teacher who constantly stuttered over to being, the main bad guy in the end, because throughout the movie you would think, oh, it must be Snape who did it, because he has a resentment for Harry because he reminds him of James, who's Harry's father. And you might think that, oh, well, he's clearly the bad guy, but no, we have this plot twist in which, Quirrell is the bad guy, and then when you lead up into everything that he did, casting the spell on him when Harry when he was playing Quidditch, and then letting the troll in, it all kind of builds up and it makes a lot of sense. And just seeing Voldemort behind Quirrell's head was like really terrifying and kind of creeped me out. And then and also another thing was like that really stuck out was the scene in which when Harry sees the Mirror of Erised and he sees his parents for the first time. In the original book, he actually sees his entire family. Not only his parents, but he also saw his like aunt and uncle and his grandfather and a whole bunch of people. So I guess it makes a lot of sense to see his parents. But yeah, I thought that was a really sweet moment. And then, of course, when you see Dumbledore coming by and telling him that, that the mirror is, it shows your deepest and darkest desires, but you shouldn't rely on it just so you can find, happiness knowing that your parents are, they're standing right in front of you.
Yeah. And then he saw himself holding thick woolen socks.
Yes, although from what I remember in an interview with J.K. Rowling, that was a lie. He actually did see himself with his family, including his sister. But yeah, imagine that, a professor who has pretty much everything in the world, and he sees himself holding a pair of socks. Okay.
Set up socks.
Yeah, socks. Not just any socks, thick woolen socks. But oh my god, I remember this part as well. So the second time in which Harry goes over to the restricted section in the library and he tries to find information about Nicholas Flamel, and he grabs the book and he's trying to open it and it starts screaming at him. I remember when I first saw that, it really freaked me out. It almost kind of reminded me of the Necronomicon.
Yeah, just creepiest part of the movie. One of the creepiest parts of the movie scared the crap out of me.
Yeah. I think for the most part, yeah, it's a pretty solid movie. I even saw the deleted scenes that they had to cut from the movie as well, like Harry going over the details of his list to Hagrid over at the subway, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione, walking out of the bathroom after the troll attack, and so...
The eggs, and that first DVD where you had to go through like this huge quest to find them. I remember that.
Oh yeah. Because I remember when I remember that I couldn't find them for the life of me. Like I went to like almost every Blockbuster and Barnes and Noble, but it just wasn't feasible enough for me to find them because they would always be sold out. And they always pair the DVDs alongside with the Harry Potter books. So it's like, great. Now it's a less likely chance for me to find it.
Yeah.
But I think for anybody who's especially a lot younger, who has never even read or even seen them, I do recommend checking it out for yourself, just so you can see and, how much we were inspired by reading the books or watching the movies the first time around. I want to go over to Chamber of Secrets next, which came out a year later. And, in the book, I remember that I really liked Chamber of Secrets because it felt like a continuation of the story. We have the introduction of Dobby, the house elf, the dangers of Harry not allowed to be going back to Hogwarts, and then we have the introduction of Tom Riddle and the secret journal that Ginny gets a hold of, and then Harry starts finding out about, and then the mystery of this. The mystery of all the Muggles turning into stone. So yeah, both of the book and of the movie, I think it's pretty solid. I do know that for a lot of people, they complained about the second movie, because they felt it was like a rehash tone of the first one, which I guess it kind of makes sense, but you have to remember that both of the books being like a year apart, it does feel somewhat similar, except in the book it's slightly darker, but for the most part I do feel that it being consistent with the way it was, I think it made a lot of sense.
I think the movie's my favorite of the series.
Oh, really? Wow! I never heard anybody say that.
Some of it's nostalgia because it was the first one I saw in theaters.
Oh.
But I still love it, and I think it actually is pretty darker. Like the first one, there's a few dark scenes, and the second one, there are pretty horrifying parts. That snake, the spiders. I remember my sister was always scared to watch it. I don't know. I don't get the complaint that it's tonally exactly the same as the first one.
I mean, if you read both of the books back to back, it's pretty much the same. So I don't understand why people were complaining about it. It's like, but if you read the books back to back, especially since the books were a year apart, you would kind of understand that, J.K. Rowling was fresh off of her huge success of the first book, that you would think that maybe for people who are interested in finding out what happens next, it would feel similar to the, the next time around. And also, it's not like it's a complete rehash. There's a lot of new things that are added into it, like you get more introduction to the Weasley family, you get introduced to Lucius Malfoy, and, you also find out that Harry speaks Parseltongue, which is the ability to speak to snakes. The stakes are higher, and it's a lot more creepier with them going to the Forbidden Forest, being surrounded by the spiders, and meeting up with the basilisk, and finding out of the identity of Tom Riddle, and, the whole mystery about it. Whoa, is Hagrid the one who let the monster into Hogwarts 50 years ago? He's the bad guy the whole time? So, it's not like it's like a complete rehash. So, I mean, admittedly, the movie does omit some things, some for the better, because let's be honest, I never really understood Harry, Ron, and Hermione going over to nearly Headless Nick's 500th death day, which I'm really glad they cut off from the movie.
I think the only reason they had that was just to introduce Moaning Myrtle, but then they could have just introduced her in the bathroom, which is what they did, so...
Yeah, that's the one liberty that I really did like from the movie, because, yeah, that scene was completely pointless. And, of course, for the deleted scene, you have the Dursleys meeting up with Mr. and Mrs. Mason, who's Vernon's boss, who wants to have a promotion, which, if you see the deleted scene, it's there, but it's not really that important. The most important thing is that Dobby comes along and tells Harry not to go back to Hogwarts because he fears that something terrible is going to happen. So that part is still there. Let's see what else. And another thing I really wish would have been a little bit more fleshed out was when Harry found out from Tom Riddle's memories about Hagrid being, the one who was responsible for bringing in the monster when Tom Riddle finds Hagrid over in the closet. I wish that would have been developed a little bit more. That way, the suspense would be a lot more higher, and then eventually, when Hagrid was taken over to Azkaban, I wish that would have been featured a little bit more. And, of course, there's the ending. I'm sorry, I don't like the ending. I'm not talking about the climax in which when Harry...
the last 2 to 5 minutes, after Hermione comes back, I'd usually just shut it off. No, it's over.
Yeah, which that never happened in the book. In the original book, it was supposed to be the case in which, they usually have their goodbyes, that you have, Harry saying, oh, I'm going to try this thing with Dudley, or, I'm going to, and then we have everybody just saying goodbye. I mean, Hagrid does feature in the last part, and we do have that scene in which, Dumbledore announces that, because of recent events, final exams will be canceled. That stuff was in the book, and then it just kind of leaves it off there with Harry going back to King's Cross Station to meet up with his aunt and uncle, like he always does. But, yeah, that scene with Hagrid coming back and, everybody applauding, that just was really schmaltzy.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually just turn it off.
Yeah.
I think every book pretty much ends at King's Cross, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of them do end in King's Cross. I think Goblet of Fire doesn't end in King's Cross, or maybe it does, but it's pretty vague because this is when Cedric died.
Yeah.
And I believe Order of the Phoenix doesn't either, because I remember that this was when Dumbledore tells Harry everything about why Voldemort, went after Harry's parents. And, let's see, as for Half-Blood Prince...
That ended at the school, because it was right after Dumbledore's funeral. I remember that ending.
Yeah, exactly. That didn't end in King's Cross. And neither did Half-Blood Prince, because that was when Harry, Ron, and Hermione find the letter from RB, which is Regulus Black, that the Horcrux that they got from the cave was a fake. So, yeah, that wasn't in King's Cross either. But Deathly Hallows was, but that's for a different story, but yeah. Okay, so Prisoner of Azkaban. I remember when I got this book for my birthday. I must have been Must have been like maybe either 15 or 16 at the time. Yeah, I felt that it was kind of like the last of the light adventures, but leaning more towards the dark side, especially with the introduction of Sirius Black. And, I've heard a lot of consensus. I've seen so many articles and videos talking about the movie adaptation, about how it's the best. I'm going to say an unpopular opinion. I don't think it is.
It's weird. I think most people who haven't read the book say it's the best. People who haven't seen it think it's one of the weaker ones. And it really is jarring. It's like everyone hasn't read the books, thinks it's the best. I personally would put it in the middle.
Me too, because here's the thing. It's so convoluted that I'm surprised people who have never read the books actually understand what's going on.
Oh, yeah, especially when they cut out the Marauder's backstory. Like, that was a pretty big omission that I kind of wish they put in. Like, that seems like it was very important for how Lupin knew what the map was.
And also, I cannot forgive the rush, and I repeat, rush conclusion in which they found out, oh, look, Peter Pettigrew was the one who betrayed Harry's parents. And then, have Lupin and Sirius group up together and say all this exposition so quickly. It's like, I remember in the book, this took a while to happen.
I think that was 3 chapters worth or something.
Yeah, it was like 2 or 3. Yeah, it was like 2 or 3 chapters worth of information that they took their time into saying. And we have Harry so angry of wanting to kill Sirius Black. And then Lupin says, you have to hold your temper, Harry. We will explain everything. And they do. But in the movie, nope. They explain in less than 3 minutes. And then Harry's like, okay, sure.
Well, I guess that's a thing that happened. Everything I've believed for the past few months has just been turned upside down.
Yeah, and the thing is that in the movie, he was surprisingly okay with it. It wasn't until when Peter Pettigrew admitted that, yes, he was the one who was supposed to watch over Harry's parents, and yes, he was the one who betrayed him to Voldemort, that's when Harry wanted to kill Pettigrew, which it was shown in the book, but again, it was way too quick. And then he said, yeah, let's take him over to Azkaban, have him arrested, and then Sirius will be free. And then we even have that scene in which Sirius says, as soon as I'm a free man, you can come live with me. And then we have Harry immediately saying, like, oh, when can we move in? Because, again, in the book, it makes a lot of sense because we've had the follow-up of, yes, Harry has lived a really crappy life with the Dursleys. That makes a lot of sense. And even though that, sure, Sirius is not, in the right position to take somebody like Harry, but again, makes a lot of sense. But yeah, in the book, it doesn't really follow up. And I think that we have, obviously there's a different there's a different tonal direction as well. Instead of Chris Columbus, we have Alfonso Cuarón, and he puts in a little bit more of a darker perspective in this, which is kind of interesting because I always felt Goblet of Fire is where the series took a dark direction, not Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always thought. Goblet of Fire should have been the turning point where it should have gotten darker, whereas Prisoner of Azkaban definitely should have stuck closer to the first 2.
Yeah, I guess it would have made a lot more sense if Chris Columbus would have stuck with the project, but because he felt that, he didn't want to be away from his family and working so hard with these movies, he decided to leave, which makes a lot of sense, and I respect him for that. But yeah. I felt that, don't get me wrong, really respect his work, Alfonso Cuarón's work, but I feel like he should have definitely took liberties of what his predecessor did and try to follow along with keeping the same consistency, because, from between the first 2 movies and the third one, it does not look the same whatsoever.
Yeah, I believe he said that he didn't watch the first 2 because he didn't want that to influence how he would make it. He wanted to make the movie he wanted to make. I forget what he exactly said, but he didn't read the first 2 books, watch the first 2 movies specifically so he wouldn't get distracted and could just make the movie he wanted to make. Bring the script to life the way he thought would work the best with the script.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's fine. But yes, I do feel that it should have been a little bit more consistent with the tone of, everything that happened previously. And, another thing that I wasn't really too crazy about was that, with all these characters that are introduced, especially in the third one. The third one is one of the most important in the entire franchise, and I'm referring to the books. It's the most important one because it introduces so many things. It introduces the Dementors, which are the creatures that come on by and suck out your happiness, and Harry is very fearful of them. It introduces Lupin, who is the best defense against the dark arts teacher they've ever had, and he would carry on throughout the rest of the series. It introduces, Sirius Black, who's a fan favorite for a lot of people because he started off as he's the prisoner of Azkaban for the past 13 years because he was the one responsible for leading Voldemort to killing Harry's parents. And, of course, we had the revelation of the Marauders map. Then we have Snape, who has a huge anger and resentment for both Black and with Lupin. And then the introduction of Peter Pettigrew, who actually was revealed to have been disguised as Scabbers from the first 2 books. And we saw Scabbers on and off. And then we have Crookshanks.
Crookshanks didn't have much of a purpose in the movie other than make Ron get mad at Hermione a lot. Like in the book, he was a Kneasel, if I recall, like half Kneasel or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he was a really intelligent creature who helped out Sirius with getting across the secret passages in Hogwarts so that he can be able to get in without noticing, which again was never mentioned in the movies.
And got them into the Shrieking Shack by touching the thing that made the Whomping Willow stop.
Yes.
Paralyzed.
Yes, and Crookshanks was also the one who tried to capture Scabbers so he can bring him back to Sirius, which ended up with Ron being injured and being scratched with him having a resentment of Crookshanks, which I don't believe was in the book, in the movie. I mean, maybe it was, but it was kind of very vague.
It was mostly played for laughs.
Yeah, so for the most part, even though that Crookshanks wasn't featured a lot in the books, but in the third one he was pretty important. Yeah, and also another thing, Lupin was also a really important character. And do you remember the one scene in which they're at the bridge and he's talking to Harry about how he knew his mother? He shouldn't be talking about that. He should be talking about how he knew his father very well. I mean, sure, he knew Lily, but he was mostly best friends with James. He should have been talking more about James, which I remember when I saw the movie, I was really confused. Shouldn't he be talking more about James? Because remember, they had the pact together. It was Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, the keepers of the Marauders map, them being best friends. They found out that when Lupin was the werewolf, they decided to take transfiguration classes so they can be able to turn into animals and help him out every month. So I would think that maybe he would talk to Harry more about James than Lily, which that also confused me. And also the scenes in which when Lupin is teaching Harry about defending himself with the Dementors, that was also really well done. Just like in the book about how, he teaches him to defeat them by teaching him Expecto Patronum. So there is a lot of good things in the movie, but for me personally, it's just really rushed. The tone is pretty inconsistent. At times it tries to be Harry and Ron and Hermione, they're teenagers now. They're all grown up. And, they're acting, really moody at points. But then you have, really funny moments, which were in the original book that kind of takes you out of it.
I do like that Hermione punched Malfoy instead of slapped him. That just made it more... that got me even more than in the book.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, she slapped Malfoy as opposed to punching him in the movie. Which, again, good liberties from the movie to the book. So, I do agree with that. And then we have the introduction of Buckbeak, which... I get that Buckbeak, he was a character that was featured in when Hagrid was teaching, the class for the first time. And then afterwards we have the scene in which when Harry approaches Buckbeak, flying him around and, gains a little bit of respect. It does reveal that, Buckbeak was accused of attacking Malfoy by hurting him. And, that all that stuff was in the book as well. And, all that stuff is pretty well done, too. But then afterwards, Buckbeak isn't featured at all throughout the remaining movies, even though in the books he has been featured at least in Goblet of Fire.
Yeah, I know he was also in Order of the Phoenix. I think he was in the number 12 Grimmauld Place. And I forget if he ever showed up after that.
I don't think so. I don't remember reading about him in Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, he definitely just disappeared, after the third movie, which I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened to him either. You know, I guess it's just like, once again, it's like those characters that just came and went pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, overall, Prisoner of Azkaban is one of my favorite books. As for, like, movies, I get that a lot of people really like it, but I feel for me, it's, like, way too rushed to leave a massive impact on me because it reveals a lot of things. It should be a really important movie because it reveals, you know, about Pettigrew, about how he was the one who betrayed Harry's parents to giving them to Voldemort. It reveals about Sirius Black, about how he's one of James and Lily's oldest friends. It also it just introduces so many things that I just wish that they would have taken time to building up, because it would be really important in other books, or in this case other movies, but yeah, it just doesn't. It's a bit of a rush to me. So yeah, I agree with you, Kyle. I kind of see it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I really like it, but I totally understand that. That's sort of how I feel about Order of the Phoenix when we get to that.
Oh, God.
But
Order of the Phoenix... Yeah, we'll get to that. Oh, my God. So, yeah, Goblet of Fire. I remember when this book came out, I was, again, really excited for it because it revealed that, you know, now the series is going to be taking a dark direction. And we have the Triwizard Tournament where it involves with the 7-year students competing against one another. And, oh man, there's, like, different wizarding schools. And also, there's, like, a huge tournament. And then, of course, you know, we have... the introduction of various characters once again, and this is when Voldemort comes back. Oh man, what's gonna happen next? So yeah, I was really excited when the book came out, and I remember reading it, and it was just really, really interesting. It definitely felt a lot different than the previous books.
It's a lot bigger.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger. And, you know, it actually doesn't start off with, it actually starts off pretty simple enough. You know, we have... it's kind of interesting because this is like one of the very few times in which I wish they would have shown, you know, the Dursleys' perspective here, because in Goblet of Fire in the movie, I don't think they ever show the Dursleys in this one.
No, it starts out with Harry at the Weasleys before they go to the Triwizard Cup.
Yes, because I remember that it starts off, in the original book, it starts off with Harry with the Dursleys, and Dudley is on a diet because he can no longer fit into the school uniforms.
I think he said it reached the weight of a baby killer whale.
Yes, that's right. Reached the weight of a baby killer whale. And so that's the only way that Harry was able to get over to with the Weasleys was that they traveled via flu powder, and they, in each and every single one of them, came in and they introduced themselves to the Dursleys, who are just looking at him absolutely confused. And they talk about, there's a big Quidditch tournament coming up with Ireland versus Bulgaria, and we want to invite Harry over. And then the Dursleys were like saying, yeah, take him away, we don't want him right now. That's how Harry actually goes over to the Weasleys and seeing the big Quidditch tournament. And here's another thing that they didn't do in the movies. In the book, this is where we first get introduced to Bill and Charlie. That's the older brothers of the Weasleys. We got introduced to Bill in, strangely enough, Half-Blood Prince, and this was when he was already attacked by Fenrir Greyback. So yeah, I mean, as for the movies, they pretty much ignored Charlie. I think that Charlie may have been mentioned like maybe once, and that was in the first movie, and that was when Hagrid dropped off Norbert over in Bulgaria because they had to get rid of Norbert because he was causing too much trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the only time they mentioned Charlie. As for everything else, no, he was never included ever again. Which, you know, again, is kind of a shame that they didn't, but to be quite honest, Charlie was never really a big, massive character in any of the Harry Potter books. I mean, you obviously have Ron, Fred and George, Percy, and Bill... Yes, arguably Bill, because he did help with the Order of the Phoenix fight, and that was how he was attacked by Fenrir. But yeah, also Percy's arc in the books was never featured in the movies, about how he was incredibly resentful to Harry because he felt that the lies of Voldemort returning was a complete lie, and how he was really loyal to the Ministry of Magic, and so he felt that all that stuff was a lie, and then he kind of disowned his family. That was never featured.
Yeah, I heard they filmed it. Like, there's a bunch of deleted stuff that doesn't even show up on, like, the DVD deleted scenes, but they filmed a bunch, and I think they said, the actor who played Percy said they did film stuff, they just, it just didn't make it in.
Again, makes a lot of sense. There are so many things in Goblet of Fire, especially in the books, that, man, I really like, but then I really hate it. I think you know what I'm talking about, Kyle. The way that Dumbledore found out that Harry's name was in the Goblet of Fire.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
Oh, my God. If anybody read the book, it said, black and white, clear as day, saying, Dumbledore approached Harry calmly, saying, Harry, did you put your name on the Goblet of Fire? As opposed to saying, like, Harry, did you put your name on the Goblet of Fire?
We have gotten some good memes out of it, I'll say that.
Yeah, that was... I have no idea where that was. I have no idea where that came from. But,
I think that was direction. I don't think Michael Gambon said it. I'm pretty sure it was just direction.
I don't know what it was, but my God, that moment was stupid.
Yeah.
And... also, I really wish that the whole reveal of Moody becoming Barty Crouch Jr. would have been fleshed out a little bit more. I mean, I know it was hinted at. I mean, especially with... I don't remember in the book if Barty Crouch Jr. had, like, that inflection where he twitched his eye and licked his lip. I don't remember that.
I don't think if they did, I don't remember, but I don't think he did. That was more of a... thing.
Yeah, I think it was more of a movie thing, because I don't remember anything like that. I think the only thing that I do remember was that, I think in the book, I do remember that, Moody was drinking a lot.
He did a few times in the movie. I remember he did one at the Yule Ball and occasionally, but yeah, not as much as the book.
Yeah, the book he did it a lot. But yeah, in the movie, he would, like, occasionally, like, take a swig, but that's just the Polyjuice Potion, which is the same as in the book. And, also, definitely the highlight for me was the way that the Triwizard Tournament was portrayed. It followed really, really well. Like, the trial with the dragons, and also the trial with taking away your loved one, and you have to save them by going underwater, and fighting off against the crazy mer people and the sirens, and then, of course, the final one where they're in the maze, and they have to find the Triwizard Cup, and then the reveal of Voldemort. Especially when Voldemort comes back, and then you have going over to the grave, and getting Tom Riddle Sr.'s bone, and Pettigrew cutting off his arm, and drawing some of Harry's blood. That was in the book, and yes, it is genuinely as creepy as you think it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And also, let's be honest, I mean, Robert Pattinson did... he was probably, like... He was much better in this movie than he ever was in Twilight.
Yeah.
Which is kind of saying something. It's like, hey, look, everybody, Edward Cullen is not a complete bland character who sparkles in the sunlight.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen him act well in other things, too, so...
Yeah, sure. It's just that, a lot of people point out, like, oh, Robert Pattinson in Twilight, but no, he was in Harry Potter first. Anyway, so, yeah, and also the scene in which when, Cedric was killed off, and it was revealed, and then when, Harry brought him back over to the Triwizard Tournament, and everybody was, like, feeling sad and devastated.
I cried when that happened.
Yeah, I did too, because here's the thing, I mean, I never really felt that way in the book. I mean, sure, you saw him a handful of times, especially when he's trying to defend Harry with, all that, the teasing about, like, Harry is the fake, and Cedric Diggory is the true the true Hogwarts champion or whatever. And, you got to see him a handful of times, and you do get to see that devastation in which, when everybody was shocked that Cedric was dead, and then you have Dumbledore coming by and giving that speech about Cedric's passing, about how, it's revealed that Dumbledore was back, that Voldemort was back. I didn't feel that strong in the books compared to when I saw it in the movie.
Yeah, in the books, if I recall, as soon as he got back, Moody sort of pulled him away and he didn't get to see a lot of what was happening around him. So, whereas in the movie, they can show everyone's face, they can show people crying, like Joe and his dad. So it has that more of an emotional pull to it.
Yeah. But yeah, and of course, if you're wondering about, like, oh, you know, the reveal of Moody doing all those things, you know, it came out of nowhere, well, that was also in the book, too. And it wasn't like they took a long... but here's the thing, unlike in the movie, and similar to how it was revealed in Prisoner of Azkaban, they actually did take a lot of time in revealing all that stuff. Like, you have Snape and you have Dumbledore coming on by, they find out that Moody was acting suspicious, and they turn him back into Barty Crouch Jr., and he does reveal a lot of information about how, from the very beginning, he was the one who was with his father watching the tournament, and that he was the one who brought in he was the one who brought in the seal of Voldemort's followers up in the sky. So yeah, he was there from the very beginning. And in this one, in the movie, it reveals pretty much nothing.
Yeah, there was that other house elf, Winky, I believe.
Yes, yeah. Winky, yeah. And Winky was also in there, too, but she's never featured in anything. She's never featured in the movies. And Dobby's supposed to be there. He's supposed to be the free house elf who's proud of being free. And Winky is the one who's supposed to be, like, the timid one who's constantly drinking and crying that she's not fulfilling her duties of her master, which is the Barty Crouch. So, yeah. We would have seen Dobby a lot sooner, as opposed to, like, in Deathly Hallows Part 1, where he comes completely out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, yeah, I think that for the most part, yes, I do like Goblet of Fire, because that's the one where it's the dark point. I like the book, but the movie, it has good points and it has bad points.
Yeah, pretty much.
Alright, next we go over to Order of the Phoenix. Or as I like to call it, probably one of the worst movie adaptations I've ever seen. But I love the book. I really do love the book. I remember when I first read the book, it was like a big turning point, because this is where we're revealed about everything. And of course, you have that stupid meme of Snape killed Dumbledore, I just saved you 800 pages.
Wasn't that Half-Blood Prince? Yeah.
No, I mean Half-Blood. Yeah, Half-Blood. Oh, no, wait, no, I'm sorry. It was like, Sirius dies. That's what it is. Sirius dies, I saved you 500 pages. That's what it was. Okay, so yeah, Sirius Black dies, I saved you 500 pages. Yeah, and I really like Order of the Phoenix, because, you know, it has Sirius as a much more recurring character, and it has Dumbledore's army, which I really liked, having more of the students coming together and working together to fight off against Voldemort and his followers. I do like that, you know, we have little bits about Voldemort coming back, and, you know, we see meetings of the henchmen and, you know, all that stuff, and I like that. But, man, I felt that the movie, I don't know, there was just something about the movie that just felt... I mean, it felt like it added so much, but then there were some things that shouldn't have been there, so... where do I start?
It's the longest book, and for a while was the shortest movie. The only movie that's shorter is Deathly Hallows Part 2, which is based on 10 chapters of a book that's already shorter than Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah. And I remember when I saw your video on the top 10 dumbest Harry Potter moments, and you were talking about, like, the first 11 minutes of Order of the Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and again, the book delves a lot more deeper into it, in which, you know, you have Harry, and he's thinking about Cedric's death, and then you have Dudley coming along with his gang, which, again, is in the book, but...
We don't know who the characters are in the movie, like,
no,
they just sort of...
No, in the book, it's actually revealed that 2 of them are friends of Dudley's who we know of from the first book, and the other 2 are, like, his classmates from his school or something. So, yeah, and they keep calling him Big D. And I don't recall them... I mean, I do know that they do dress up in, like, gangster clothing because 90s. But, yeah, this whole thing just comes right out of nowhere. It would have made a lot more sense if maybe they had, like, a quick montage of Harry being chased around by these kids in the first movie. Like, you know, we have Harry, and he's running around and being chased by his friends, and then he ends up in the roof or something, like in the book. But no, I mean, it's like taking something straight out of, like, West Side Story with him being surrounded by a bunch of thugs. And then we have, you know, them being chased by the Dementors. And, you know, again, that also does happen in the book. But, and then we have Harry saying Expecto Patronum. But in the movie, he actually stabs the Dementor, which is, like, What?
You can't do that.
No, you can't do that. They're kind of like ghosts. You can't stab a ghost. No matter what you do, you can't stab a ghost. But yeah, then we have the Dursleys. They are appearing to be like really hot from the summer weather, but it's like you said in the video, it looks like they're high.
Yeah, it's just really weird. It's like the Dursleys were always played more for comedy in the movies than they were in the books, but that was a little too much. Like, oh, Vernon's eating because he's fat. That's the thing.
Yeah. Exactly. And in the original book, from what I recall, they're watching the news. Because, I think they're watching the news, like a lot of the times they do. And then we have Harry carrying Dudley. And then, she's like shocked as like, what's going on? What happened? And then they have this long talk right before the owl comes in and says to Harry that he's expelled. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, right before that even happens, Mrs. Fig comes along. Okay. I mean, it would have made a lot more sense if Mrs. Fig was featured in the first 2 Harry Potter movies, like she is in the book. But no, this is the first and last time that we ever see of her.
I can see why they didn't put her in the first movie, because it's like they didn't know she was going to be important. They could have. What I think they should have done is just give her a little bit of exposition in this movie.
Yeah, like maybe while Harry was carrying Dudley, maybe she could have been talking to him as like, Mrs. Fig, how do you know this was going to happen? And then she would be like, well, Harry, I'm a squib. I've known all along that you were a wizard, and I knew that you were going to Hogwarts, and Dumbledore told me, and blah 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 blah. Maybe a little bit of the exposition could have been going on, but nope, it's really quick.
Yeah, I remember she talked about she can't see them because squibs can't see them.
Right, now I remember. But I remember that she was there a little bit longer in the book.
Yeah.
But not much in the movie, which, again, I guess it makes a lot of sense because she's a character that people have just got introduced to. And of course, this movie does introduce us to more characters. One of my favorites is Luna Lovegood, and I really like Luna Lovegood. She's one of my favorite characters in the series. It introduces the Dumbledore's army with Harry teaching everybody the dark arts and how to defend themselves against it, how to do their how to do Expecto Patronum, and this is actually the part in which Neville gets a lot of character development, but here they kind of just slash it and pretty much leave it up to Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2.
Yeah. The Order of the Phoenix, I think, does have some of the best casting decisions, but...
Yeah.
And the best soundtracks.
Yes.
So it does have things going for it.
Yeah, it does have good things, but unfortunately, it's once again being bogged by being incredibly rushed. They introduce all these brand new characters like Luna and Bellatrix Lestrange, which is also a major character who would later on become very prominent in other movies and books. But again, it's really quick, and especially we have the prophecy. The prophecy that's kept into the Ministry of Magic that they have to retrieve because Voldemort wants to retrieve it so he can be able to hear the full prophecy. And this is where Sirius dies. But again, it doesn't really leave that strong impact. I remember when I first read that part, I was incredibly devastated. But then when I saw it in the movie, I didn't feel sad about it at all. It was kind of like a reverse. It was reversed to me. Like I wasn't sad about when Cedric died, but I was in the movie. I was sad about when Sirius died in the book, but I wasn't in the movie.
It wasn't a very great effect for the first thing. It's like a CG Gary Oldman falling back into this ghostly veil.
Yeah, which never happens because Sirius was off somewhere else. He wasn't even with Harry and the gang. He fought off against Bellatrix alone while Harry and Hermione were going after the veil. And then it was told off screen, Sirius was killed off screen, and then it was revealed that Sirius died. And that's when we find out that Sirius was dead, because it was killed by Bellatrix Lestrange, and we never got to see it happen. But when we do see it happen, it's kind of disappointing.
I think in the book, he also wasn't hit with Avada Kedavra, if I recall. He was like the Expelliarmus or Stupefy or something and pushed back into the veil, and like that's what killed him?
I think that's what happened. Yeah, he was never killed by Avada Kedavra.
And Avada Kedavra, he's hit, and in the movie he's hit with it, but it doesn't kill him instantly like it does every other character.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he does have like godlike figures for like once, and then the second time he's just dead. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then we have the reveal of Dumbledore sitting down with Harry at his office, telling him about what happened. And in the book, it was, like, really detailed. The prophecy, the fact that, that in the end, one of them would be dead and the other one would survive. And, yeah, I mean, and it was also even revealed that it may have not been Harry who may have been the one in prophecy. It may have been Neville. Because they were born roughly around the same time. Neville was born in July 30th. Harry was born in July 31st. And they both had families who were part of the Order of the Phoenix. They both thwarted Voldemort 3 times. So it could have been either one of them. And, I really felt that, the way that it was told in the book was actually really fascinating.
Did Dumbledore even say in the movie that it was Trelawney who did the prophecy?
No, not even once. I don't think it was even once, because, Trelawney was the one who was, like, possessed, and she was the one who gave off the prophecy. I mean, maybe it was shown, but maybe, I probably don't even remember. I think it was shown. I think it was the one scene in which when Trelawney was, like, trans or something, and then she kind of, like, tells in a very ominous voice to Harry about, like, the prophecy. I think that did happen, but as for Dumbledore finding out, about Dumbledore going over to Trelawney's ancestor, like grandmother or something, about learning about the prophecy for the first time, I don't think that was ever mentioned in the movie.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, which again would have been really helpful. Alright, so final words, I do think that, as mentioned before, Order of the Phoenix, really great book, reveals a lot of great things, develops the characters, introduces a lot of new ones. The movie,
it's fun. I'll give it that.
Sure, absolutely.
Well acted. It looks nice, but it's still my least favorite of the movies.
Yeah.
Like the others, it's the only one I'd consider less than really good, like personally.
Yeah. Half-Blood Prince. I'm kind of mixed with this because I know it's the second to last of the books as well as the movies, but I always felt that this one was a little bit, like, too dark. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, finding the Horcruxes, and Malfoy leading up to doing his father's work because he was captured by the Ministry of Magic and sent over to Azkaban, and he had to fulfill his father's duties of taking over. And we even see that scene in which Draco's mother and Bellatrix make the pact with Snape to, protect him at all costs, and I get that, but it just felt a little bit too dark. And of course, we have the origins of Voldemort when he was a young boy, which it definitely expands a little bit more. We get to know about him as a boy, you get to see him in his teenage years, and see the him meeting up with everybody and eventually killing them and making the next Horcrux. But I'm kind of mixed with this. At the one hand, it is a great origin story of Voldemort, learning a lot about him and learning a little bit more about the the spell book of the Half-Blood Prince. But I've always been mixed with this one.
This was always sort of my least favorite of the books, not necessarily because it was too dark, but because anything that wasn't focused on the origin of Voldemort just felt like really hokey teen drama romance stuff, which was always there, but it was mixed in well with the action, adventure, fantasy element. And here it's like some parts you get it, and then like a lot of it is just this romance. And Ginny and Harry, their romance just sort of sprung on. Like, some people say it's felt natural. I always thought it was just sort of like started in the 6th book and just came out of nowhere. Or
I mean, I guess we could kind of argue that it started off from the 2nd book when Ginny was saved by Harry from Tom, and maybe she felt a spark in love with him because he saved her life, and maybe like during that time she would she always saw Harry around with Ron and Hermione. I mean, I wish that maybe throughout the books it would have kind of led up to that, but then you have Ginny kind of switching between boyfriends and not knowing about who she really is. I mean, with her being the only girl in a family full of brothers, and I think that would have been a lot more interesting if we would have known about that. But in neither of the books, I mean, a little bit more toward the books, but definitely in the movies, we don't really feel that development, especially with her and Harry.
Yeah.
And this was supposed to be the one that we're supposed to say, oh, Ginny and Harry, they're together all this time. And even I think J.K. Rowling even admits that she kind of made a mistake, that she always felt that Harry and Hermione should have been together.
Yeah, I remember before the last book came out, there was always arguments against me, my friends, and family who read the book, like, who's Harry going to end up with if he survives? Will he end up with Hermione or Ginny? And if it was supposed to be Ginny, I feel it should have been a lot stronger, because everyone I knew always thought he was going to go with Hermione. Because they had a better connection.
Yeah, they did have a better connection, especially with Deathly Hallows, in which Harry and Hermione, they were the ones who were finding the Horcrux after Ron ditched him. So, yeah, you would think that maybe during that time they would have developed a really strong relationship towards one another, but no, they threw in the whole Harry-Ginny thing, which even still now I never really was a fan of, even with the books. I was like, okay, I can tolerate it, but yeah, the romance thing kind of started with the fourth one, when Harry had developed a crush on Cho, but then Cho went out with Cedric, and then when the fifth one came along, she was with Dumbledore's army, and that was when they had their first kiss. So there was romance there, but in the sixth one, it was like, now they wanted to emphasize the romance with not only with Ron and not only with Harry and with Ginny, also with Ron and with Lavender, which that came out of nowhere. Even in the books, Lavender was always a very minor character.
Oh, yeah.
But now here, she's over there smothering over Ron. They have a pet. She gives him a pet name. And this was like when Ron was the keeper of the Quidditch games. And, that was when, he was a terrible, keeper. And he kind of like almost flubbed it if it wasn't for the fact that Hermione helped him out. And even Hermione was being crushed on by this guy who was like a jerk over to Harry and Ron. So yeah, they really emphasized it in the sixth book, when it could have felt like it should have belonged maybe either in the fourth or the third or the fourth book. It should have been more emphasizing the love thing, but not at the sixth, when the stakes were a lot more stakier, especially with the dark tone that the book was leading up towards.
Sort of like, okay, she probably thought, oh, okay, I'm ending, I should probably build more with these relationships if I'm going to have it end with these characters together, but she really should have done it in earlier stuff.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I really did like was, I really did like Draco's story, in which he feels pressured into fulfilling his father's duties of a mission involving with killing Dumbledore. And you can imagine a teenage boy having to fulfill something involving with the Dark Lord. I mean, it can build a lot of pressure for a kid, and you feel really bad for him. He goes through a mixture of following his duties, going over into the Room of Requirement to find the, device that will help, transfer over the Voldemort's men over to Hogwarts. And then that was when their major plan happened. I really liked the buildup of that, when at first, he's delivering the items like the apple and also the bird to see if the item was to work. I really liked that buildup, and it leading over to Borgin and Binks. And that's great, a place that we knew about from the second book, or the second movie in this case, in which it was, over into the other side of Diagon Alley, which was filled with items that were of the dark arts. Again, I really like that. And, we see Harry kind of turn into a more darker character when he acquires the potion book belonging to the Half-Blood Prince, and he learns about these spells to defeat your enemies, and he kind of turns into a more darker side of himself, which, again, I really like. The whole chosen one thing feeling more like a burden than a blessing.
Yeah. I definitely think that was one of the parts that was better done in the movie, seeing Draco, because in the book it's sort of a mystery, like, what is he up to, what's he doing, because it's all from Harry's perspective, but in the movie we can see Malfoy doing all that stuff, so that's an example of using visuals to convey a story.
Yeah. And also, I do like, when Harry spends a lot of time with Dumbledore, when he's learning more about Voldemort's backstory. When looking through the memories in the Pensieve, convincing Professor Slughorn to give him the piece of the memory, discussing what the Horcrux. and, finding more information about where the Horcrux are, that we already destroyed, at least 2 of them. Dumbledore destroyed Voldemort's mother's ring. He destroyed the Tom Riddle's diary, and then they discover about the necklace that's over in the cave. So yeah, that's actually really interesting, and it definitely leads up to the 7th book where they find more of it, and that's fantastic. And then we have the ending, which I even mentioned it in the meme, that, Professor Snape kills Dumbledore, I saved you 800 pages. And yeah, that was a shock to me. It's like, we always saw Snape as like a bad guy, but not a bad guy. He always had reasons on why he did that. Like, we thought that he was responsible for the attacks in the first book. No, it was Quirrell. Why is he acting really suspicious when, Lupin is around? Well, Lupin was a werewolf, and he did some things that involve with his life being saved by James, and, all these things. And you think that, he was just a guy that was a bad person to Harry, but he never really did bad things. But no, in this one, he kills Dumbledore, and now he's cited as the villain.
Yeah. He was always sort of a jerk, except in the first one where you think he might be bad. He was just a jerk, or kind of a bad teacher in a lot of ways, but he was never outright evil. Mm-hmm. For me, the reason the Half-Blood Prince movie is one of the few I actually kind of prefer more than the book. Not necessarily because, like I said, the book has a lot of the romantic comedy elements that in the book were just sort of there. It didn't mesh well. But in the movie, I thought the actors and director pulled it off a lot better. Like, I actually think it's possibly the funniest of the movies, or at least one of them. Mm-hmm. Because, like, when Harry takes the luck potion, Felicia, and he's sort of acting high and just... I know Daniel Radcliffe said he didn't really like the way he played the role in the 6th movie, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess maybe for him, he kind of felt out of place doing these comedic things when the story was dark. Maybe that was why, I don't know. But yeah, in the book, it was always described that he was more optimistic and smiling, as opposed to being, like, completely high and saying, like, hey, let's go visit Hagrid. I feel like we should go visit Hagrid because, I don't know, we should. And, yeah, yes, that was in the book as well. But, yeah, his face just looks like he's on drugs, as opposed to being, like, really optimistic and smiling all the time. But, yeah, other than that, yeah, I'm kind of mixed with both the book and the movie. I do prefer the movie a little bit more, absolutely, because we actually do get to see more perspective of the characters and the backstory of Voldemort. So, yeah, I do like the movie slightly more than the book. Alright. Last one we have is the Deathly Hallows, and yeah, this was like one of the first of many that thought, yeah, let's split it up into 2 parts. And with Harry Potter, I understood it at first because it's a long book. It has a lot of details. But then when you look at the first part and then you look at the second part, I kind of understand what they were going through, where they got the idea from. Like, the first part, you have the wedding, you have them escaping from the attack, you have them being in the forest, wandering around, trying to find the remaining Horcruxes, and then hiding from Voldemort's men or from people who want to capture them and get reward money. I get that. But, yeah, it definitely drags a bit. And I felt that maybe it could have been done if they would have done the whole 1-part movie. I mean, even if it was like 3 hours long, I would have been acceptable to it. But you cut a lot of things from the other books. Why did you want to bring a much more detailed one here? You could have cut some things in these movies, and I think it would have been fine, especially with the second part. There were a bit of omissions, but it turned out to be a much better package because it felt a lot more conclusive.
Yeah, I guess they wanted to do it because, well, besides money, it's the finale. Like, we want to make it as big as possible.
Yeah, but what about Return of the King? Return of the King was a massive movie, and it didn't have to split into 2 parts.
Yeah, but technically wasn't the whole Lord of the Rings, like, wasn't that designed to be 3 books, and they split it into 3 parts?
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, so the first half, it does start off pretty well. I mean, it does start off pretty well to the book. I really wish they would have kept in the deleted scenes in which when Mrs. Dursley is talking to Harry about his mom.
When I saw those deleted scenes, I'm like, why didn't you keep those in?
Yeah, those were great. I mean, the only thing that we see from the Dursleys is that we see Mr. Dursley and Dudley packing away their stuff and they're leaving. That's it. As opposed to, like, in the 7th book, you have the Dursleys sitting down, they're packing up their things, they have a genuine talk about how they have to hide away because Voldemort might find them and kill them, and even though that they never really had an agreement at all, and they never would, but they did kind of have like a final respect towards one another, especially knowing that they would never see each other again. And even with Dudley kind of shaking his hand, making peace with Harry, that was actually really nice. And there was something like that in the movie, but it's a deleted scene, and you wish that would happen. I mean, even especially with, if you ever read the Pottermore website, in which every once in a while Harry and Dudley would visit each other, and they would have their cousins mingling with each other, and they would be kind of like sitting down on the couch completely bored and not knowing what to say. So at least that's nice to know that they still kept in touch. But yeah, I really wish that scene would have happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we have the wedding of Bill and Fleur, which once again, Bill was brought in the movie in Half-Blood Prince, even though that he would have been introduced in Goblet of Fire, and he would be brought back in Order of the Phoenix, helping out Harry and the gang over in the Ministry of Magic, trying to capture the Veil where the prophecy was, and that was where he was attacked by Fenrir. But unfortunately, with the exception of Fleur, who we knew from Goblet of Fire, this wedding doesn't really leave that much of an impact, with the exception that the Minister of Magic is there, and he brings in the last remnants of items that Dumbledore had left behind for Harry, Ron, and Hermione. So, yeah, we have, so Hermione gets the book, Ron gets, his light seeker, which, you can turn off the lights, and the lights come in, get sucked in, then comes back out, and then Harry gets the golden snitch. And that part of the book does happen, and they're wondering on why they got these gifts, and then we have the attack, and then Harry, Ron, and Hermione hide away into the forest, hearing the news constantly about all the Muggle families and the wizard families that are constantly disappearing, and they're trying to find the Horcruxes. And, of course, that stuff does happen. But I have to say that when they sneak over to the Ministry of Magic, disguising themselves as the co-workers, trying to see if the Horcrux that is around Professor Umbridge's neck, that scene was actually pretty funny, and it was actually a really tense moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that, and I always imagined that from the book, but it was actually really cool to see it on screen. But, yeah, then we have them in the forest, and I have to say that, man, Ron was such a whiner in this one. Like, he was constantly complaining that, we haven't found a Horcrux, and we're wandering around, and, we're accomplishing nothing, and we do know that Ron has constantly been whining, but in the book, this is the most he's ever complained. I mean, sure, he has complained a handful of times, like being jealous of Harry when he gets all the attention and being the chosen one and all that stuff. I get it. But at some points, especially in Deathly Hallows, Ron becomes incredibly unlikable.
Yeah, to be fair, he was wearing the locket, which makes you more aggressive and have negative emotions. But, yeah, but he did learn his lessons at least.
Mm-hmm. And also, when Harry and Hermione go over to Godric's Hollow, it's also another favorite of mine, in which when he goes over to Harry's parents' gravestones, and he meets up with Bathilda Bagshot, which was actually mentioned in book number 1, where she actually wrote about the history of magic. And that was actually a really nice callback. I just wish that the movie would have done that, because I remember when I heard Bathilda Bagshot in the movie, and my sister was watching it with me, and she's like, "Who is that?" And I was like, "Well, that's the woman who wrote the history of magic from the first book." It's like, who? And I was like, I'll explain it later. So yeah, again, similar to Mrs. Fig, we have a character that was briefly introduced to, like, one of the most important, witches who knew about the history of magic over the last half a century. And it's not really her, it's actually her body that was pretty much controlled by Voldemort, and it's actually Nagini in disguise, where Bathilda was actually dead a long time ago.
Yeah. I was always confused what that was. Like, did he morph thing around the snake, or was the snake in, like, her body and controlling her? That always confused me, and even when I saw the movie, it was kind of confusing.
Yeah, I mean, we see with Hermione going over to the closet and finding her dead body, so, or at least, like, remnants of her body, or at least something covered in blood, so maybe that could have been it. I'm not even sure at this point, but, yeah, and then, you know, of course, then we have the scene in which Dobby returns, and for a lot of people, they were, like, either really excited or they were confused, because for movie viewers, they hadn't seen Dobby since Chamber of Secrets. But as for readers, he has been in Goblet of Fire, he has been in Order of the Phoenix, and he was briefly there in The Half-Blood Prince. But yeah, I mean, he has been helping, you know, he's been telling Hermione about how, you know, Hermione has always been about freeing the house elves, and she keeps leaving around pieces of clothing so that the house elves can be free, and Dobby's the one who's wearing all the hats and all the shirts and all the socks, saying, like, Dobby is wearing these things because none of the other house elves want to be free. So, we have seen Dobby around a few times, but yeah, this is the biggest scene that Dobby has ever been in since the second book. And yeah, I remember when Dobby when Dobby dies, I remember a lot of people were really sad with this scene.
I remember they definitely were in the movie. It was one of those theater experiences where everyone was reacting to everything, and when Dobby got the knife in him, everyone was like, oh, and I think someone was crying behind me and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I admit that it was really sad, but I'm surprised for people who had never seen the movie, who never seen Harry Potter outside of outside the movies and never read the books. I was surprised that it did leave a big impact on them, because, you know, with Dobby, we have seen him a handful of times in the books, but as for the movie, it's been a long time, so I'm surprised that it did leave people crying.
Yeah, I think Creature had more of a bigger impact in the movies.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And Creature, he was only there like a handful of times. Like, he was there every time they were over in Grimwald Place, which will only happen maybe like a few times. But yeah, you're right. That Creature actually had a much bigger impact in the movies than he was in the books, as opposed to the other way around. But yeah, definitely in both the books and in the movies, the scene is very, very sad. And also, the scene in which Hermione was being tortured by Bellatrix was actually pretty frightening. It was in the book as well, but in the movie, it was pretty scary.
And Helena Bonham Carter and Emma Watson even improvised that thing where she carves mudblood into her arm. And I saw that, I was like shocked, like, holy crap.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't even in the book. That was like that's actually pretty good. I mean, the only time in which we did see any form of like writing of blood in the hand was when Harry had gotten the pen from Professor Umbridge writing about, I swear I will tell no lies. And it was his blood, and it was etched into his hand. But the whole thing with mudblood in her arm, that was actually pretty frightening. And, you know, another thing that I also really did enjoy when watching that part of the movie was when it felt like a bit of a suspense, like them constantly hiding so that they wouldn't get caught. And especially when we had like, we had the bandits trying to capture anybody who is of Muggle or closely associated with Harry Potter so that they can get money. And it was actually more longer stretched in the book, in which they made up this lie about how Harry's name was Dudley, was like Henry Dudley or something like that. And, you know, Hermione even cast that spell in his face that he was pretty unrecognizable. And then, okay, you know what? I think I really need to talk about this. So, the demise of Pettigrew.
Pettigrew. Oh yeah, that was just not... In the book, it was really... I can understand them not wanting to go that way for a PG-13. It might be a little graphic, but did they have to play it as a joke?
Especially, it would have... I mean, here's the thing. In the books, Pettigrew had an arc. In the third book, he was supposed to be the guy who was hiding as a rat for 13 years. He was found out by Lupin and Black, and it was revealed that he was the one responsible for leading Voldemort to kill Harry's parents. In the fourth book, he sacrificed his arm so that Voldemort can come back to life, in the 5th book, he was around Voldemort's side, doing what he said, and I don't think he was around as much in the 6th. But definitely in the 7th, this was supposed to be that moment in which when Harry confronted Pettigrew, and Pettigrew was about to attack Harry, but then Harry said, "No, you owe me, Wormtail." And then he slowly lets go of him. But then the Hand reacted, saying, "You're not following my orders," and he chokes him to death. Now, I think what would have been smarter is maybe, like, during the time in which when Pettigrew was dragging Harry over to the dungeon, maybe he could have said, "You can't do this to me, Pettigrew. I saved your life. You owe me." And then maybe he would have, like, pulled out his wand or something to attack him. But maybe, like, when he was about to cast a spell, maybe the spell backfired on him when he showed a little bit of remorse. I don't know. But, yeah, Pettigrew was pretty much ruined in the movie. I mean, if they were able to carve out the word mudblood in Hermione's arm in blood, then why couldn't they kill Pettigrew in something similar to that? Or even a little more vague, as opposed to, like, being shot in the back by Dobby.
Yeah, that's what they should have done. Make it vague. Like, he starts to strangle himself and he falls to the ground, and the two run out, and you slowly hear him choking. And, like, Harry can look back one little thing and see, like, a shadow slowly, like, stop. Like, he's struggling and then he stops. I think that would have been not only a lot more powerful, but it would have gotten past the censor, so he still could have gotten a PG-13.
Yeah, and it would have been somewhat close to the book. But no, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But hey, I mean, at least maybe the reason why that happened was to maybe build up Dobby until the unfortunate passing of him being stabbed in the back. But, I mean, he helped out Ollivander and Luna Lovegood escape, and he stood up to Bellatrix Lestrange, and he helped them escape over to the little village, the little shack. So at least he helped out a lot. But yeah, I think that there could have been a little bit more tweaking that it would have made a little bit more sense. But that's just a nitpick for Dobby's perspective. But yeah, I still think that was a pretty strong moment. But yeah, not really much. The one thing that I really have to say is I really love the presentation when Hermione is reading The Beadle of the Bard, the Tale of the Three Brothers. The way that the animation was presented and how dark and stylized it was, that was amazing. Yeah,
that was a beautiful scene. I can't remember who did it. Like, I looked it up once, but I can't remember. It was like...
Yeah, but whoever did it, they did a phenomenal job. Like, it was supposed to be like a fairy tale, a fairy tale of being cautioned to, cheating off against death or something, and, it was like a fairy tale. And the way that was pulled off was actually really cool, and it led up to the discussion about the three sacred objects. You had the Resurrection Stone, you had the Elder Wand, and you had the Cloak of Invincibility. And Voldemort wanted the Elder Wand because it was the most powerful wand in the world, and that nobody can be able to stop him. And that was what happened in the end, in which he went over to Dumbledore's grave, and he got the Elder Wand. And when you saw that in the ending of the movie, you felt, oh man, now things are going to get really serious. And then the second half happened, and I remember that this came out, I think it came out roughly around the same time as Cars 2. And I remember that a lot of kids were watching Cars 2, and I was watching The Deathly Hallows Part 2. And I remember just having so much fun with it. My family and I, we went to go watch it. And it was just one of the most fun experiences I've ever had watching a movie in the theaters.
Yep. That was... me and my dad went to go see the midnight premiere. Like, that became sort of me and my dad's thing. We would always go to see the movies. Like, my mom took me to the second one, but then it was me and my dad, and for the fourth one, it was also my cousins, but...
Okay. Yeah, so I would have... Yeah, but this was actually a great finale. It tied up every loose end. It was able to bring upon, great character arcs. I'm just kind of a little disappointed that it was Neville who got the most growth out of this one, when it all started off with Order of the Phoenix, but yeah, you know what? At least they were able to pull off a really good job with it. With Neville standing up to Voldemort's henchmen and pulling off the elaborate trick in the bridge and cutting off Nagini's head and standing up to Voldemort after everybody assumes that Harry's dead. So at least, okay, that kind of made it up for me, I have to admit. But yeah, it does play. There are a lot of scenes that are played very similar to the book, in which there's a lot of build-up to finding the remaining Horcruxes. They finally go over to Hogwarts. They meet up with Dumbledore's brother. The only thing is that I wish that they would have developed more of Dumbledore's story, because the best thing about Dumbledore was that he was a mystery. Nobody really knew who he was. But it was definitely Hallows that taught us about how his father went kind of completely insane when he killed off a family, and his name was disgraced, and that his sister kind of went a little insane, and that she couldn't have full control of her powers, and Dumbledore kind of felt like he was held back in becoming a great wizard, and his kind of gay relationship with Grindelwald and all that stuff. So it was kind of like vaguely told by Aberforth, but I wish it would have developed so much more. Like that scene in which the Tale of the Three Brothers, in which they had like that little montage with the animation. I wish they would have had something like that. That would have been so great.
That would have been neat.
I think that would have been great, because I remember when I read in the book about Dumbledore's backstory, and I've always wanted to know about that. I mean, the first half was about when Dumbledore died, and then we had the news reporter saying, "My goodness, boy, didn't you know Dumbledore at all?" And then the second half, I think it would have been great if we would have known a lot more about Dumbledore's backstory from his brother, because that's what happened in the book. And the painting is of Dumbledore's sister. So why didn't we know more about Dumbledore's family? I guess everybody was just too concerned about the Battle of Hogwarts to lay more about that.
Yeah, and in the book, like, especially in the first half, Harry was even doubting Dumbledore in a lot of areas. He was like, was Dumbledore as great as I thought? Was he just setting me up? Did he even know what we were doing?
Yeah. And then Aberforth was like saying about how he shouldn't have listened to Dumbledore as much, because Dumbledore had filled the boy's head with a lot of false things, and that the war is over, Voldemort had won, you should have no hope whatsoever, blah 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 blah. So yeah, I mean, I know that they did have a talking with Aberforth about like, your brother never stopped having faith, and that we would win, that I'm the chosen one, and all that stuff. Okay. I just wish that moment would have lasted just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But seriously, the Battle of Hogwarts scene is amazing, and nobody will ever tell me otherwise.
Oh yeah, it is amazing.
I mean, seriously, you have like the giant, stone knights, and you have the giants coming on by, and you have the fire and the spell.
The spiders and all these wizards and just flying around and stuff.
It's so great.
It's a treat to see in the theater.
Oh my god, I remember that experience. I remember when everybody was laughing when the wizards were waiting for the shield to drop down from Hogwarts, and Neville was being chased through the bridge, and everybody was like laughing and on the edge of their seats, and then the explosion happens, and then Neville was at the edge, and then he grabbed on, and then he climbed back up, and everybody was cheering. It's like, oh, it's so great, oh my god. Anyway, but
I don't think I've ever heard an audience cheer as much as when Neville cut off Nagini's head. That was one of the best experiences I've ever had in the theater, was the audience just uproaring when that happened.
Oh yeah, that was just like that was similar to when everybody was laughing and cheering when Hulk grabbed Loki and tossed him back and forth in the Avengers. Oh my god, that was so great. But yeah, and then when we had the battle. And then we had the aftermath, and okay, so yeah, this is like toward the scene in which like we see Fred dying, and Tonks and Lupin were dead, and a lot of people were dead, and I'm gonna have to say this up front, that I really wish that in the movies they would have fleshed out Tonks a lot more, because Tonks was one of my favorite characters in the book, but she's pretty vague in the movies.
Yeah. I think the actress really gave a lot more personality, but the script, she just sort of was always there.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I love the portrayal of the actress. She did a fantastic job, and I think she's also in Game of Thrones as well. But no, she did a great job. But yeah, I think that, Tonks is a great character. She is, she's a half-blood. Her mother is one of the sisters of the Lestrange family. Like, she's related to Bellatrix and to Draco's mother. And her mother was pretty much written off of the family when she married a muggle. And she's really proud of her heritage, and she can transform into a whole bunch of things. And she even says, every time that she sees Harry, she always says, "Watcha, Harry?" And she never says that in the movie, and I miss that. And also the relationship with her and Lupin is really adorable. And it's never even mentioned in the movie that she got pregnant with Lupin's child, and Lupin was really concerned about if he's going to be a great father because of his werewolf powers, and even tells Harry that, can you please be my son's godfather? And he said yes.
I think once they mentioned that Lupin was going to have a kid, like when Harry was in the forest and he sees his parents and Lupin and everything.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That mentioned once, but that was when after he was dead. He's like, "I'm sorry that you couldn't be there for your son." It's like, wait, he had a kid? What?
Yeah. If you haven't read the books, you'll be like, what?
Yeah, exactly. What? But yeah, he does have a son. His name is Teddy, and he does get raised by his grandmother, as in Tonks' mom. And back and forth, he would visit Harry and his family. And when he turns 18, he starts falling in love with Bill and Floor's daughter. And there's even talks about him living with the Potters, which, that's really nice. But yeah, apparently he looks very similar to his mom, in which he can kind of transform his look, he can transform his color of his hair into a different color or something like that. But I don't think he even has the werewolf powers from his father, so yeah, he's not really much of a fleshed out character. I don't even think he is in Pottermore either, but yeah, the only time in which you hear about that Lupin has a son is when after he's dead. Not as I do remember in part 1, even Tonks was teasing Harry. He's like, "Oh, Harry, we got the most amazing news. Lupin and I," and then Moody comes along and says, "We have no time for, talks and pleasantries." And then you never hear about it. I mean, I don't even know if it's in the deleted scenes. I haven't seen any of the deleted scenes of Deathly Hallows, but yeah, that's the only time in which you hear about that Lupin and Tonks have a kid. Anyway, but yeah, and then of course we have the major scene in which when, Harry goes over to Voldemort and sacrifices his life. And you might be thinking, oh man, this is it. So Harry's supposed to be the one to die. So because, it's revealed from the prophecy, one shall kill while the other survives. And then it turns out that the Golden Snitch has the Resurrection Stone, and then he kind of holds it into his hand, and then when he gets killed, is actually that he was the Horcrux that Voldemort never intended on creating, and then he comes back to life later on. And then afterwards we have the scene with Voldemort and with Harry, and it's not as action-packed as it is in the book. In the book, there's a lot of talking. Lots of talking.
Yeah, it's 6 pages of exposition to try and do it, and then one spell.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I can see why they changed it.
Yeah, I mean, the movie was already action-packed as it is, so that's making it even more action-packed. And in the original book, Voldemort and Harry do have a wand duel, and it kind of stops towards one another because they both have a connection with the Phoenix Corps. But then, Harry does kill Voldemort, and Voldemort does disintegrate, but it's actually a more quick disintegration. In the movie, it's really slow.
Yeah. Did he disintegrate in the book? I don't remember. I thought he just fell.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He did fall. That's right, yeah. Yeah, he did fall. I'm confusing with the book. But yeah, he did fall, and, so he did fall, and he fell, Voldemort fell down dead, and that was pretty much it. But yeah, in the movie, he disintegrated. And
I kind of see what they were going for. He tore his soul up so much that he was basically just this empty shell, so I get what they were going for.
Yeah, it's interesting because I even saw a film theory from Matt Pat, and he was discussing about how much of a percentage is Voldemort's soul inside of Voldemort compared to the other Horcruxes. He made a theory about 50% of his soul was in Tom Riddle's diary, and then 25% was in the necklace, and then the smaller the percentage was for the other items, and it was I'm sorry.
That actually does make sense. 50% in the diary, the largest one, and that's like it had a lot of power. It was able to do a lot of stuff. It was able to manifest a vision and control the basilisk and everything. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think Pat came to the conclusion that 0.625% of Voldemort was his body, and that when Harry was shot by Voldemort, making the unintentional Horcrux, he was like 1.5%. So he came to the conclusion that Harry was more Voldemort than Voldemort was, like in a sense of like how much of a percentage of the soul was inside of him. And then when it was killed off by Harry, and then eventually Nagini, when Neville cut her head off, cut her head off, then Voldemort pretty much didn't stand a chance. So yeah, I can kind of see that. In that perspective. And then, after Voldemort's death, it actually leads up into a very sad note where they were talking about, like, all the people who sacrificed their lives. Like, over 50 people died trying to, defend Hogwarts, and it would be forever known as, like, the Battle of Hogwarts and stuff like that. And, and then, of course, we have the ending of the book in which when Harry has the Elder Wand. And the reason why it didn't work for Voldemort was because the last person who disarmed, Dumbledore was actually Malfoy, because he had the intent of killing him, as opposed to Snape, in which he was actually told of doing that. And so technically, because he was the one who disarmed Malfoy when getting the wand from him, the Elder Wand didn't respond to him. And that makes a lot of sense. And because, every time that you kill an owner of the Elder Wand, the owner changes. And yeah, in the book, he gets the Elder Wand and he fixes his old wand back. And then he kind of like leaves the Elder Wand back in Dumbledore's grave. But in the movie, he actually just snapped the Elder Wand in half and he threw it away, hoping that nobody will ever get it.
I guess that does make more sense. We never see him fix his wand. I guess he just did that off screen.
Yeah. Maybe Ollivander came back and fixed his wand, good as new, and yeah, that was pretty much it. So yeah, I guess before we talk about the ending, I want to talk about the reveal of Snape. In Book 6, Snape killed Dumbledore, and everybody assumed that he was the bad guy, and he was the one who took over as headmaster in Hogwarts. And then there's a big reveal from the Pensieve that Snape was really close to Lily, about how he absolutely loved her. And that he started changing his ways when he started meeting up with all the other Slytherins who were close to Voldemort and practicing the dark arts, and how he completely changed. But he still had a deep affection for Lily deep down inside. And it followed all throughout the entire book series and even the movies at this point, about how he had to protect Harry from all the dangers that were happening to him. And I mean, especially in that one scene in which he reveals what his he revealed on, his form of evading the Dementors was a doe similar to Lily, and that same doe was the one who led him over to Godric Gryffindor's sword. And I also really love the scene in which when Dumbledore was shocked about it, and he said, "You've been protecting him?" And then he said, "Always." And that struck me. That moment struck me, both in the book and in the movie. Man, that struck me.
Yeah. And Alan Rickman just did a great job of delivering that one line.
Yeah, I even heard that J.K. Rowling was the one who, she showed Alan Rickman what happened to Snape even before anybody else knew. So he was able to prepare himself for that one scene, which I thought it was a great idea. It's very similar to how only a handful of people knew about the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father. Like, only James Earl Jones and the director, the producer, and George Lucas knew. Not even Mark Hamill knew, because they wanted a genuine moment of him being completely shocked. So I can imagine, especially with the cast, of how incredibly surprised they were that, Snape was the good guy the entire time. And even Harry develops a really strong respect for him. And yeah, it does make a lot of sense, because he was protecting him all this time, even though that he kind of had a bitter hatred towards Harry because he reminded him so much of James.
That was one of those things that everyone I knew was debating about, was, is James good, is Snape good or bad? Along with who will Harry end up with at the end, and I was right. I was one who said he was a good guy. So
yeah. So yeah, let's discuss about the ending, because I hear so many people having mixed reviews about this ending. Like, they thought it was a little too schmaltzy. Some people thought it was a nice closure. But yeah, I'm kind of mixed. I mean, I do like the fact that we do get to see Harry, Ron, and Hermione 19 years later dropping off their kids over to King's Cross Station and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that it's alright. I mean, I don't hate it, like, compared to everybody else, but I think it's just fine.
Yeah, I could see why some people would find it overly schmaltzy. It's sort of like how the ending of the second movie, but it's sort of one of those things I forgive, because it's built over, like, 7 books, 8 movies, 10 years. It's like, I can forgive it for going a little sentimental and extremely schmaltzy. And it's like, I'm good with that.
Sure. Although, I do kind of question the fact that he named one of his sons Albus Severus. That's kind of goofy. But still, I like it okay. And, you know, they would continue the story much later on in the play. And, you know, that's fine. You know, that they want to continue the story onward with the kids. I'm okay with it. I mean, they're already doing it with Naruto, focusing on Naruto's son, and I'm fine with that. I don't care. But yeah, I think that because we were led up with something incredibly dark throughout Deathly Hallows, I guess they wanted something really light and kind of satisfying, which it was pretty satisfying, but maybe they could have toned it down just a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I don't hate it as much as I don't hate it compared to a lot of people who do. I just find it okay. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much it with that franchise, so I guess we can talk about the newest movie, and that is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And you know what? I really respect what this movie did, because it was essentially a book. Like, not just like a book, it's like one of Harry's school books. That's pretty much it. It's just about a book about the different creatures that are in the world, that are in the wizarding world. That's pretty much what it is. It was written by a fictitious author that belongs in the Harry Potter universe, and it talks about all the creatures. And it, you do get to see, like, you see Harry Potter's name in the outside, and you get to see him write notes, like, one of the creatures is compared to, like, Snape and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's basically like reading Harry's textbook. But the fact that it was able to build up like a prequel before Harry and taking place in the 20s and 30s and introducing to Newt Scamander, I actually thought it was better than it had any right to be.
Yeah, I think the reason is J.K. Rowling actually wrote the screenplay, which makes the movie, she was involved a lot in like notes and stuff, but they were written by mostly Steve Kloves, except for the 5th one, who was written by, I think Michael Goldenberg was his name.
Yeah, I think so.
If anything, this movie, Fantastic Beasts, it feels the most J.K. Rowling of them. It's got a lot of great world building, which I think is her biggest strength.
Yeah, and also, it does feel like it's a prequel to Harry Potter, because it does feature some of the magical elements, but it does so in a way in which we actually get to see more of the Muggle world, and we actually do get to see the creatures, just like in Fantastic Beasts, but we also get to build different characters, and that's another thing that she's also really good at, building different characters, building the worlds up, and it's great. It's actually a really good movie. It's basically something created out of nothing. Now it really makes me curious as how she's going to do Quidditch Through the Ages, because that was another of Harry's books. Maybe she'll talk about, like, maybe the very first Quidditch team, like, or maybe like a really popular Quidditch team, like even during Harry's time or something. So I don't know.
Do a coming of age movie like Rocky or the Karate Kid, except with Quidditch. Then I'd watch it. I
would watch it. Yeah, I would like it too. That'd be great. Or who knows? Maybe another movie that would focus more on the American wizarding schools, because it has been revealed a few years ago that there are 4 wizarding schools in America. And I would love to see more information about that, and also others from all around the world. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for that. But yeah, I think that for the most part, another thing. I remember a few months ago, there was like a trailer that I saw on Facebook. It was a fan-made movie about Voldemort's backstory. And it was supposed to be like when he was first starting out with his reign as the Dark Lord. And we have this woman who's a detective who's going to be finding out what he is doing and where he's going to be going and what is his next accomplishment. And I remember that Warner Brothers was very close to doing a cease and desist, but then they were making an agreement about them possibly doing it because, obviously, it's a property that belongs to Warner Brothers, but they wanted to do this movie about Voldemort, about his young adult years, his eventual turning point of becoming the Dark Lord. And the trailer looks really, really good. A lot of people really thought that this was going to be the next movie, but it wasn't. It was a fan-made movie, and I'm really glad that Warner Brothers is allowing them to have a chance, because unlike other companies, Nintendo, they would actually allow fans to come by and tell the story in a different way, which I really respect. I can't wait to see what more comes of it.
That's fascinating. I don't even remember hearing about that.
Yeah, it was briefly talked about in Facebook. Let me see if I can look it up. But yeah, I remember when I saw it and I was like, yeah, that looks like a really interesting one. Let me just see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. It's it's called Voldemort Origins of the Heir. I'll definitely send you over the link when this is done. But yeah, I remember when I first heard about it and I was like, oh wow, this would be actually really cool. Learning more about Voldemort, I mean, I like that in Half-Blood Prince, so maybe a more detailed event about going from his time after Hogwarts all the way up to the leading of him killing Harry's family. Sure! That'd be great!
Yeah, that could work. That's, kind of like sort of what the Star Wars prequels did with Darth Vader.
Yeah, sort of, except in one movie as opposed to 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the last thing obviously is the Harry Potter play, which is still not out in America, and I know that the screenplay is already in book form, which I've never read, so I cannot tell you. So I cannot tell you what my thoughts are, but all I know is that it focuses on Albus Severus, and it focuses on his year at Hogwarts, and him living under the shadows of Harry Potter, and everybody thinking that he should be, as great as his father and all that stuff. So, yeah, I've never read it. Maybe I'll have the chance to read it. So, yeah, I think that's it for the most part. So, yeah, now that it's been 20 years since the first book, what do you think of the franchise looking back on it?
Just wonderful memories of not only reading the books, but seeing the movies, playing the games. I really want to go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at some point. Just when I think back to Harry Potter, I think memories. That's memories of the adventure, of the characters, the comedy. That J.K. Rowling created just this wonderful world with lovable characters and some very hateable characters. And I cannot thank her enough. I love this series, and I hope that the world expands for many years to come.
Yeah, as for me, I definitely am very appreciative that J.K. Rowling was able to build up a gigantic world filled with characters that we all love and enjoy or hate. And she was able to bring in the imagination of people trying to accomplish their goals or trying to follow whatever path is in their way just so they can be able to do the right thing. And I really respect her for that. As somebody who came from nothing and built a gigantic franchise as a whole, it really speaks to the minds of, if you put your heart into it, even if you're going through so many trials and tribulations, so many obstacles that are against you, there's always a light in the tunnel that can show you that, good things will happen to you. You just have to put a lot of work into it and believe that what you're doing is the right thing. And for that, I cannot thank her enough for all the amazing books that she written and the movies that came out of it. Everybody who's been involved, whether it be a little or a lot, yeah, it left a massive impact. And it will continue to do so. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to what the future holds. Alright, I think that should be it for this episode. So, yeah, Kyle, why don't you plug and promote your stuff?
Yes, you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Kyle Norty, or follow me on Twitter or Facebook at North is Up Productions. And thank you for letting me be involved here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. thank you for coming. All right. All right, so I think that should be it for this episode of Casual Chats. Let us know in the comments below about how you first got introduced to Harry Potter. Was it the books? Was it the movies? Which is your favorite? Which is your least favorite? Who are your favorite characters? What were your favorite moments? Yeah, that's it. Hope to see you around soon, and thank you for listening.
Ago this story starts. There were 4 sorcerers with strong and wise hearts, but Gryffindor from Wildmoor, fair Ravenclaw from Glen, sweet Hufflepuff from Valley Broad, should Slytherin from Fen. They had a dream to teach all that they knew. Witches and wizards came far, and it grew till the castle stood tall by the shores of a lake. And 1,000 years later, the magic remains. Old Hogwarts sorting hat, sing me a song. Speak in my head, tell me where I belong. And when things look bad and there's nowhere to run,